It had been one of those lazy nights, the kind where no one really had a plan but didn't want to call it quits either. The four of us were packed into Greg's basement, sprawled across old beanbags and couch cushions that smelled faintly of dust and cheap cologne. Someone had dug out a pack of old Marlboros, and Greg had tossed on some album that was mostly static and ghostly guitar riffs. Tommy was doing his best impression of our principal, using a deep, absurd voice, much to everyone's amusement. I leaned back against the wall, watching my friends goof around and trying to tune out a low-grade sense of restlessness. It was rare these days that we got to just hang out like this, with everyone busy, part-time jobs, classes, family stuff. We were lucky to get a few hours together, let alone a whole evening. I was grateful for it, even if it was just hanging out in a musty basement, swapping bad jokes. We had spent the last hour eating stale chips and debating whether it was worth going out for food. But every time we got close to agreeing, someone would start up another conversation, and we would all settle back down. Kev was in the middle of a story about some disastrous date he'd had last week when my phone buzzed, the sound cutting through the quiet laughter and casual hum of the night. I didn't think much of it at first. Probably my mom asking when I'd be home, or some random group text lighting up. But when I glanced at the screen, I saw my sister's name, glowing urgently in the dim light. It was rare for her to call this late, even rarer for her to call me at all. We got along fine, but our lives don't exactly overlap. She was younger, more into her own scene, and she usually kept me out of her business. Hang on a sec, I mumbled, stepping away from the group to answer the call. I could tell right away something was off. I didn't even have to say hello. Her voice was rushed, almost a whisper, and there was noise in the background. Music, people arguing, someone yelling like they were way too drunk. "Casey," she said, her voice almost swallowed up by the noise. "Hey, can you come pick me up?" Yeah, sure," I replied, thrown off by the tension in her voice. "You okay?" There was a pause, the sound of her moving away from the crowd. "Not really," she admitted, a strain in her voice. "The party's getting weird. We have a situation. I don't know how to explain it, but can you just get here fast?" That was all it took. I glanced back at the guys, all of whom had gone silent, listening in as I finished the call. "We gotta go," I said, feeling a prickle of worry. I didn't explain, but they didn't ask. They all just stood, shaking off the comfort of the night and grabbing their jackets, feeling a shared sense of urgency settle over them. "Guess we're going for a drive," Kev said, trying to keep it light as we all piled into Greg's car. But even he was quieter than usual, and I could feel my own tension spreading to the others. Greg's car rattled as it picked up speed, the low hum of the engine filling the silence that had settled over us. I sat in the passenger seat, my fingers drumming nervously against my thigh as I tried to explain where we are headed. We all knew the city well, but even I wasn't exactly sure where this party was, and every turn we took seemed to make the streets feel less familiar. "So, she told me it was somewhere off East Monroe," I said, staring out the windshield. "It's this big old house at the end of the block. She said it's the one with the porch lights that flicker." Greg nodded, his eyes fixed on the road. Though his shoulders were tense, hands gripped a little too tightly around the wheel. "East Monroe. There's nothing but old houses down there, right? People usually don't throw parties there." "That's what I thought," I replied, glancing at Greg. "But I guess some college kid's renting it now, or maybe they just snuck in. Either way, she said it was packed." Tommy leaned forward from the back seat, his voice a low murmur. "Did she say why she wanted to leave so bad?" I shook my head. "Not really. She just sounded different. Said there was some situation." "Situation?" Kev asked, his voice filled with forced lightness, trying to break the tension. "You think there's something shady going on?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how to put it into words, but her voice had sounded wrong. Like there was something she was afraid to say. Something she didn't even want to put into words over the phone. Nah, nothing like that, I finally said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Probably just some people got too drunk or whatever. But let's just get there quickly, all right. The streetlights threw long, uneven shadows as we drove, and I felt the weight of those shadows settling around us. The houses passed by, silent and dark, like they were holding secrets. I couldn't shake the feeling that the city was different tonight. Emptier, darker, like something was crouched just beyond the glow of the headlights, watching. Tommy, sensing the mood, let out a shaky laugh. Man, you guys are acting like we're about to walk into some horror movie, he said, though his voice was a little too loud, a little too forced. It's just a party. We pick her up, and we're out of there in 5 minutes. Right, Greg muttered, glancing at me. 5 minutes, in and out. We pulled up a few houses down, parking under a half-dead tree that cast warped shadows across the hood of Greg's car. The house we were looking at, the one my sister had described, was at the end of the block, its dim porch light flickering in a slow, irregular pattern. But everything else about it seemed off. Greg cut the engine, and the silence hit us like a weight. No bass thumping from inside the house, no laughter drifting out into the night, no sounds of people spilling onto the porch for a smoke or some air. The place looked abandoned, except for the dim yellow light over the door, swaying slightly in the breeze. It was a big house, 3 stories tall, the kind of place that felt like it had its own ghost stories. The windows were dark, and the yard was overgrown, as if no one had cared for it in years. You sure this is the right spot, man? Kev asked from the back, leaning forward to get a better look. He squinted, peering through the darkness like he could will the place to look more lively. This should be it, I said, pulling out my phone and trying to call my sister. I waited, listening to the ringing, but it went to voicemail. Maybe they all went somewhere else, Tommy offered, though even he sounded unconvinced. Or it ended early. I mean, it's almost 1 in the morning. I shook my head, staring hard at the house. She'd have texted me if she was leaving, or if she needed a ride somewhere else. But she hadn't texted, hadn't left me any clue except her tense, hurried call. Greg took a deep breath, glancing nervously at all of us before nodding toward the house. Maybe we should just go up, check it out. If she's not there, we'll head out, but at least we'll know. None of us moved at first, as if the idea of actually going up to the house had caught us all off guard. But then I opened the door, breaking the spell, and one by one, the rest followed, stepping out onto the quiet, empty street. We walked slowly, each step echoing a little too loudly in the silence, as if we were the only people left in the city. The street was lined with darkened houses, every window empty and watching, giving me the eerie sense that something was waiting. I led the way, my hands shoved deep in my pockets, with Greg right behind me, my gaze fixed on the house, as if I was hoping my sister would step onto the porch. As we reached the sidewalk, Kev glanced at us and whispered, "This place looks like it hasn't seen a party in decades. Are we sure this isn't, like, someone's grandma's house?" Tommy chuckled, a nervous sound that broke too soon. "If she's waiting for us inside that place, I'm not going in without a weapon." "Relax," I muttered. I wasn't sure why the house felt so wrong, but it did, and I couldn't shake it. We climbed the creaky steps to the porch, and I tried to call my sister one more time, letting it ring as we stared at the cracked, peeling front door. It felt like the night was holding its breath, waiting for us to make the next move. When all of a sudden, the door started to creak. It swung open slowly, as if someone, or something, inside had been watching us the whole time, waiting for us to come close. The hinges moaned, loud in the night, and the door opened just enough to reveal pitch-black darkness inside. It was so dark it seemed to swallow the light from the street, an unnatural kind of dark, as if it didn't want us to see what lay within. Greg swallowed, his hand hovering just inches from the door. and my heart was racing, each beat louder than the last. And then, finally, my sister picked up her phone. "Casey." Her voice was low, urgent, barely more than a whisper. "Casey, listen to me. I'm not in the house anymore. I don't know how to explain it, but you need to leave. Now, don't ask questions. Just get out of there. Please." Her words hit me like ice water, sending a shiver down my spine. I looked around at my friends, who were watching me with tense, anxious expressions. I started to say, but she cut me off. "Casey, please. You and your friends need to go before." "What the hell?" Kev shouted, his hands clawing at the ground as he tried to crawl backward, away from the small, pale hand clutching his ankle. My phone almost dropped as I looked down. A girl was lying there on the edge of the porch, half hidden by shadows, her face twisted in pain. Her skin was ashen, her clothes torn and stained with dark patches of blood. She looked barely conscious, her eyes half closed. "Oh my God," Tommy whispered, his face pale as he backed up, his eyes glued to the girl. I knelt down, trying to shake off the panic racing through me. "Hey," I said, my voice trembling. "Are you okay? What happened?" The girl's eyes flickered open just a sliver, and she looked at me, her gaze distant and hollow, as if she was staring through me. Her lips moved, but at first, no sound came out. Then, with what seemed like the last of her strength, she whispered, a voice so faint it barely reached me over the silence. "Please." The word slipped out, barely more than a breath, and her grip on Kev's ankle loosened as her head fell back, her body going limp. Kev scrambled to his feet, his face twisted in horror as he backed away, pointing a shaky finger at the girl's motionless body. "Is she dead?" The question hung in the air as we all fell silent, each of us holding our breath. Then, without warning, the girl's eyes snapped open, wide and wild, gleaming with a fierce, unnatural yellow light. Before any of us could react, she lunged at Kev, her once delicate hands twisting into claws that glinted in the dim light, razor-sharp and curved like talons. Her face had changed, her mouth stretched into a twisted, furious grin that showed teeth too sharp, too many. Kev barely had time to scream before her clawed hand latched onto his shoulder, digging in with a speed that didn't belong to someone so dead, so broken. Blood began to bloom through his clothes as her claws sank deeper, and his scream cut through the night, filled with terror and pain. "Get off him," Greg shouted, panic in his voice. He charged forward, his foot slamming into the side of the girl's body, the force of the kick enough to knock her off of Kev and send her sprawling across the ground. She landed on her side but twisted unnaturally fast, her head snapping up to glare at us, eyes filled with something dark and feral. We froze as she rose to her feet, moving in jerky, unnatural motions, her limbs bending at odd angles. She hissed, a guttural, animalistic sound that made my blood run cold. "Stay back," I yelled, grabbing a broken branch from the ground and holding it in front of her. I looked back at Kev, who was gasping for breath. He seemed more shocked than injured, but the girl didn't hesitate. She lunged forward again, faster than before, her claws flashing in the moonlight. Tommy barely managed to dodge, the tips of her claws grazing his arm, tearing through the fabric of his jacket. He stumbled backward, clutching his arm. Tommy's face was pale, his hands shaking as he fumbled in his pocket. Finally, he pulled out his old pocket knife, the blade barely 3 inches long, but it was something. His grip tightened, and he stepped forward, positioning himself between his friends and the girl, his eyes hardening with determination. "Stay away from us," he shouted, brandishing the knife. The girl let out a hiss that was almost a laugh, mocking, filled with an unnatural hunger. She lunged forward, faster than any of us could react. Tommy dodged to the side and swung the knife, the blade slicing through the air and catching her across the arm. Dark blood, too dark, almost black, spilled from the wound, but she didn't stop. She moved closer, relentless, her claws reaching for him. Tommy swung again, this time aiming lower, slicing deep into her side. She let out an inhuman screech, recoiling, her body twisting in pain, but she still didn't fall. Her eyes locked onto Tommy with a searing hatred, her mouth opening in a snarl that revealed rows of needle-sharp teeth. But Tommy didn't give her another chance. With a surge of adrenaline, he stepped forward, gripping the knife tightly, and plunged it into her chest, twisting the blade until her body shuddered and went still. For a moment, her eyes widened in shock, and then her entire body seemed to convulse, her form collapsing in on itself, dark smoke seeping from her mouth and wounds. We watched in horror as the darkness bled from her once human face distorting, dissolving into something monstrous before finally disintegrating into the ground, leaving nothing behind but silence and the echo of our panicked breaths. We just stood there, frozen, staring at the spot where she had fallen, trying to process the nightmare we had just survived. Kev's voice broke the silence, hoarse and trembling. What the hell was that? No one answered, because none of us had an answer. We just stood there in silence and tried to process what had just happened. I swallowed hard, glancing around at my friends. Kev was on his knees, clutching his shoulder where the girl's claws had torn into him, his clothes stained with dark red smears. I crouched beside him, extending a hand to help him up. "You good?" I asked. Kev winced but nodded, pulling himself up with my help. "Yeah, just gonna have some scars to show off," he muttered, trying to force a laugh, but it came out shaky. As we staggered back to the car, I realized I was still on a call with my sister. I lifted it to my ear, only to hear the faint sound of breathing on the other end. "Casey," my sister's voice was faint but urgent. What was all that noise?" I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you, but let's just say it wasn't pretty. There was this girl. She looked half dead, covered in blood. And then she just changed. Her face, her hands, everything. Like she was possessed or something." I paused, glancing back at the spot where we'd left the girl's disintegrated remains. I don't know what just happened." "Casey," she whispered, and I could hear the fear in her voice. "You have to be careful. This is bigger than I thought. That thing you saw, it's not the only one. I don't know what's happening, but it's spreading. We saw it, too, at the party. People we knew. They just started turning, like something was taking over them." She took a shaky breath. "A few of us managed to escape. We're hiding out in the high school gym. It's big enough that we can lock ourselves in and stay safe for now." I nodded, more to myself than to her, my mind racing. "All right, we're coming to you. Just stay put, all right? Don't open the doors for anyone, not until we get there." We were only a few feet from Greg's car when Tommy, who was walking a few paces ahead, stopped abruptly, his eyes wide. He raised a trembling hand, pointing down the street. My gaze followed, and my blood ran cold. Out in the street, half shrouded in shadow, were more figures. Some crawled along the ground on all fours, their limbs moving with a twisted, animalistic rhythm. Others stood, swaying slightly, their eyes wide and blank, faces twisted into eerie, vacant smiles. Their clothes were torn and bloodied, as though they'd been through the same transformation as the girl we just faced. "Oh no," Kev breathed, clutching his shoulder tighter as he backed up against the car. "There are more of them. A lot more." My mind raced, my grip tightening on the phone. "Demi, we're coming, all right," I said. "We're coming. Just hang on." "Casey, please hurry," she replied, her voice breaking with fear. We piled into Greg's car, and as Greg turned the key in the ignition, the engine roared to life, startling the creatures. Some of them turned toward the sound, their blank, hungry eyes locking onto the car as it idled, headlights casting their twisted forms in stark, horrifying relief. "Floor it, Greg," Tommy said, his voice steely. And without a second thought, Greg hit the gas, the car speeding away from the house, leaving the eerie figures behind in the rearview mirror. But I knew they weren't gone. They were spreading. And the night was far from over. Greg sped through the city streets, the faint glow of streetlights casting fleeting shadows across our faces. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a raw, gnawing fear and 100 unanswered questions. I kept my phone clutched tightly in my hand, glancing down at it every few seconds, as if my sister might call back with a new warning. Tommy sat next to Kev, popping open the first aid kit that Greg kept in his glove compartment, rummaging through its contents. Some antiseptic wipes, a few bandages, gauze, and tape. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He tore open a wipe, the smell of alcohol cutting through the cold night air. Kev winced as Tommy dabbed at his shoulder, biting back a curse. Man, go easy. Tommy shook his head, but there was a glint of amusement in his eyes. You got clawed by a possessed, whatever that was, and this is what hurts. Relax. If I don't clean it, it'll get infected. Tommy gave the bandage a final press, pulling Kev's torn shirt over it. All right, Kev, he said, dusting his hands off. That'll hold you together for now. Just try not to rip it open again, all right? Kev nodded, giving him a grateful smile. Thanks, man. I owe you one. You owe us all one, Greg muttered with a smirk, breaking the tension. They all chuckled, though it was more out of relief than humor. So, Kev started, we're picking up your sister and a few of her friends. How many, exactly? I thought back to our conversation. She didn't say exactly, just that they're hiding out in the gym, and there's a small group. Greg, how many can your car fit? Greg gripped the wheel tighter, his eyes fixed on the road. 7 if we really squeeze in. So me, you 3, your sister, and maybe 3 others. Any more than that? He trailed off, giving me a sidelong glance. We might have to make 2 trips if it comes to that. 2 trips. Tommy let out a breath. I don't think we should risk it if we don't have to. We get in, pick them up, and get out of there. It sounds like whatever's happening is getting worse. I nodded, glancing at my friends. After that, we should check on our families. I looked down at my phone, the screen dark. I haven't heard anything from my parents. I don't even know if they're home right now. One by one, the rest pulled out their phones, each trying to reach someone. Greg called his parents twice, but each attempt went straight to voicemail. Kev's calls to his family were the same. Silence on the other end, broken by the automated message. Each failed attempt only made the weight in my chest feel heavier. Tommy, I asked, looking over at him, is your uncle at home? Tommy didn't have parents. They'd passed away when he was little, and he'd been raised by his uncle on a farm out on the outskirts of the city. His uncle didn't come to town much, so it was possible he didn't even know what was happening tonight. Tommy put his phone on speaker, his hand trembling slightly. Finally, his uncle picked up. Tommy? His voice was calm and warm, completely oblivious to the chaos unfolding in the city. What are you calling me this late for, son? Hey, Uncle Dale, Tommy said, his voice quiet and tense. I just wanted to check in. Have you heard anything strange tonight? Strange? His uncle's voice held a smile. No, can't say I have. I've been home all evening, just watching the stars out on the porch. Peaceful as ever out here. There was a pause. Why, what's got you boys all worked up? Tommy looked at Kev, then out the window at the empty streets as they passed. I'm in the city right now, but things are weird. People are acting strange. I think there's some kind of emergency. His uncle chuckled. An emergency? Tommy, what are you talking about? You know, I've been telling you kids to stay away from drugs. Tommy clenched his jaw, his face paling. This isn't a joke, Uncle Dale. It's real. We saw something. And, look, if you hear anything strange out there, or if anyone knocks on your door that you don't know, just don't open it, okay? Lock all the doors and stay inside. A silence settled over the call, and Tommy's uncle's voice came back, this time more serious. "All right, Tommy, I'll do that. But where are you now? You need to get somewhere safe." "We're on our way to the high school gym," Tommy replied, "picking up Casey's sister and her friends. Then we're coming back to check on everyone else." "Good. Call me when you're on your way back," his uncle said, his tone stern but calm. "You just take care of yourself, you hear me?" Tommy nodded, as if his uncle could see it. "I will. And you too, Uncle Dale." When he hung up, we were all watching him, his expressions a mix of worry and dread. The empty streets seemed to stretch endlessly before us, each corner and shadow filled with the potential for danger. I could feel the fear tightening my chest, but I tried to focus on my sister's last words. "Just stay safe. We'll get to the gym, pick them up, and head out of here," I said. "Then we'll check on everyone. But we have to be smart about this. Keep your eyes open. And if anything happens, stick together." They all nodded, and the car fell silent as we turned onto the road leading toward the high school. But as we rounded the last corner, my heart skipped a beat. Standing in the middle of the street, illuminated by the glow of the headlights, were 3 figures. Their heads snapped toward the car, eyes wide, yellow and hungry. More of them. 4 days ago, my missing son returned. Only I don't have a son. I am a decent man. I know I'm a decent man, but I've got a gun, and I'm going to kill a man who meant a lot to me, who at one time was my pastor, my mentor, and my uncle. What's the saying about when a good man goes to war? When I arrived at the church I work at after my 2-day absence, it looked like the whole church was leaving. From some distance away, the perhaps 100 other workers pouring out of the grand church looked ant-like, compared to the great mass of the place. Their smiles met my frown entering, and they avoided me. No one spoke to me, and I didn't plan on speaking to them. I made my way to the sanctuary, hoping to find my uncle, the head pastor. He would spend hours praying there in the morning. Today, he was nowhere to be seen. No one was. I alone was tortured by the images of the stained glass windows bearing my Savior. I'm not an idiot. I know what religion has done, but it has also done a lot of good. I've seen marriages get saved, people get healed, and folks change for the better. And our church positively impacts the world. My faith gave me purpose, it gave me friends, and it was the reason I didn't kill myself at 13. Jesus means something to me, and the people here have bastardized his name. I slammed my fist on a pew, cracking it. It is my right to kill him. If Jesus raised a whip to strike the greedy in the temple, I can raise a Glock to the face of my uncle for what he did. I know there's a verse about punishing those who harm children. Solomon. I recognized the voice before I turned to see her. Ms. Ann, the head secretary, spoke behind me. Before this, she was something like a mother to me. A surrogate mother because I never knew mine. Her words unnerved me now. My hand shook, and the pain of slamming it into the pew finally hit me. Then it all came back to me. The pain of betrayal. I hardened my heart. I let the anger out. I heard my own breath pump out of me. My hand crept for my pistol in my waistband, and with my hand on my pistol, I faced her. "What?" I asked. She reeled in shock at how I spoke to her, taking 2 steps back. Her eyebrows narrowed and lips tightened in a disbelieving frown. She was an archetype of a cheerful, caring church mother. A little plump, sweet as candy, and with an air of positivity that said, "I believe in you," but also an air of authority that said, "I'm old. I've earned my respect." We stared at one another. She waited for an apology. It did not come, and she relented. She shuffled under the pressure of my gaze. Did she know she was caught? Your uncle, Pastor Saul, want to see you. He's upstairs. Sorry, your uncle is giving everyone the whole day off except you, she said. With no reply from me, Ms. Ann kept talking. I was with him. And as soon as you told him you were coming in today, He announced on the intercom everyone could have the day off today. Except you, I guess. Family, huh? I didn't speak to her. Merely glared at her, trying to determine who she really was. Did she know what was really going on? Why's your arm in a cast? Her eyebrows raised in awe. What happened to you? She stepped closer, no doubt to comfort me with a hug, as she had since I was a child. These people were not what I thought they were. They'd frightened me now. I toyed with the revolver on my hip as she got closer. Her eyes went big. She stumbled backward, falling, then got herself up and evacuated as everyone else did. She wouldn't call the cops. The church mother knew better than to involve anyone outside the church in church matters. Ms. Ann might call my uncle, though, which was fine. I ran upstairs to his office to confront him before he got the call. Well, reader, I suppose I should clue you in on what exactly made me so mad. I discovered something about my church. It was 2 days ago at my friend Mary's apartment. It was 2 a.m. in the morning, and I contemplated destroying my career as a pastor before it even got started because my chance at real love blossomed right beside me. I stayed at a friend's house, exhausted but anxious to avoid sleep. I pushed off my blanket to only cover my legs and sat up on the couch. I blinked to fight against sleep and refocus on the movie on the TV. A slasher had just killed the overly horny guy. Less than 2 feet apart from me, and only moving closer as the night wore on, was the owner of the apartment I was in. A girl I was starting to have feelings for that I would never be allowed to date, much less marry, if I wanted to inherit my uncle's church. Something aphrodisiacal stirred in the air and now rested on the couch. I knew I was either getting love or sex tonight. Sex would be a natural consequence of lowered inhibitions, the chill of her apartment that these thin blankets couldn't dampen, and the fact we found ourselves closer and closer on her couch. The frills of our blankets touched like fingers. Love would be a natural consequence of our common interests, our budding friendship. For the last 3 weeks, I had texted her nearly every hour of every day, smiling the whole time. I hoped it would be love. Like I said, I was a decent man, a good Christian boy, which meant I was 24 and still a virgin. Up until that moment, up until I met Mary, being a virgin wasn't that hard. I had never wanted someone more, and the feeling seemed mutual. The two of us played a game since I got here. Who's the bigger freak? Who can say the most crude and wild thing imaginable? Very unbecoming as a future pastor, but it was so freeing. I never got to be untamed, my wild self, with anyone connected to the church, and that was Mary, a free woman, someone whom my uncle would never accept. My uncle was like a father to me. I never knew my mom or dad. Our game started off as jokes. She told me A, and I told her B. And we kept it going, seeing who could weird out the other. Then we moved to truths, and then to secrets. And is there really any greater love than that, to share secrets? To expose your greatest mistakes to someone else, and ask for them to accept you anyway. I didn't quite know how I felt about her yet in a romantic sense. She was a friend of a friend. I was told by my friend not to try to date her because she wasn't my type, and it would just end in heartbreak and might destroy the friend group. The funny thing is, I know she was told the same. That was probably my worst relationship, Mary said, revealing one more secret, pulling the covers close to her. Honestly, I think he was a bit of a porn addict too. Her face glowed. What's the nastiest thing you've watched? I bit my lip, gritted my teeth, and strained in the light of the TV. Our game was unspoken, but the rules were obvious. You can't just back down from a question like that. I said my sin to her and then asked, "What's yours?" She groaned at mine and then made 2 genuinely funny jokes at my expense. Nah, I said between laughs. "What's yours?" "No judgments," she asked. "No judgments," I said. "And you won't tell the others?" "I promise." "Pinky promise," she said and leaned in close. I liked her smile. It was a little big, a little malicious. I liked that. I leaned forward, and our pinkies interlocked. My heart raced. Love, or sex, is fast approaching. She said what it was. Sorry to leave you in the dark, reader, but the story's best details are yet to come. She was so amazed at her confession. She said, Jesus Christ, after it. Yeah, you need him, I joked back. Her face went dark. What's that supposed to mean? She asked. What? Just a joke. No, it's not. I can see it in your eyes you're judging me. She pulled away from me. The chill of her room felt stronger than before, and my chances at sex or love moved away with her. Dude, no, I said. You made jokes about me, and I made one about you. She eyed me softer then, but her eyes still held a skeptical squint. Sorry, she said, I just know you're religious, so I thought you were going to try to get me to go to church or something. No, not really. Good old guilt settled in because her salvation was not my priority. Oh, she slid beside me again. Face soft, her constant grin back on. I just had some friends really try to force church on me, and I didn't like that. I won't step foot in a church. Oh, sorry to hear that. There's one in particular I hate, Calgary. Oh, why? I froze. I hoped I didn't show it in my face, but I was scared as hell she knew my secret. Calgary was my uncle's church. They just suck, she said, non-committal. Did she know? What makes them suck? She took a deep breath and told me her story. At 10 years old, I wanted to kill myself. I had made a makeshift noose in my closet. I poured out my crate of DVDs on the floor and brought the crate into the closet so I could stand on it. I flipped the crate upside down so it rested just below the noose. I stepped up and grabbed the rope. I was numb until that moment. My mom left, my family hated me, and I feared my dad was lost in his own insane world. The holes in the wall, welts in his own skin, and a plethora of reptiles he let roam around our house were proof. And it was so hot. He kept it as hot as hell in that house. My face was drenched as I stepped up the crate to hang myself. I hoped heaven would be cold. Heaven. That's what made me stop. I would be in heaven, and my dad would be here. I didn't want to go anywhere without my dad, even heaven. Tears gushed from my face and mixed with my salty skin to make this weird taste. I don't know why I just remember that. Anyway, I leaped off the crate and ran to my dad. I ran from the closet and into the muggy house. A little girl who needed a hug from her dad more than anything in the world. It was just him and me after all. Reptile terrariums littered the house. My dad kept buying them. We didn't even have enough places to put them anymore. I leaped over a habitat of geckos and ran around the home of bearded dragons. It was stupid. I love animals, but I hated the feeling that I was always surrounded by something inhuman crawling around. It hurt that I felt like my dad cared about them more than me. But I didn't care about any of that. I needed my dad. I pushed through the door of his room. But his bed was vacated, so that meant he was probably in his tub. But I knew getting clean was the last thing on his mind. I carried the rope with me, still in the shape of a noose. I wanted him to see what almost happened. I crashed inside. Mary, stop, he said when I took half a step in. I don't want you to step on Leviathan. Leviathan was his python. My eyes trailed from the yellow tail in front of me to the body that coiled around my dad. Leviathan clothed my dad. It wrapped itself around his groin, waist, arms, and neck, and it was a tight hold. I had seen my father walk and even run with Leviathan on him. Today, he just sat in the tub, watching it or washing himself. I'm unsure. His mental illness confused me as a child, so I never really knew what he was doing. I was the one who almost made the great permanent decision that night, but my dad looked worse than me. His veins showed, and he appeared strained, as if in a state of permanent discomfort. He sweated as much as I did, and I think he was having trouble breathing. The steam that formed in the room made it seem like a sauna. He was torturing himself, all for Leviathan's sake. Dad. I closed the door. My dad barked. between taking a large, uncomfortable breath. "You'll make it cold for Leviathan." "Yes, sir." I did as he commanded and shut the door. Then I ran to him. "Stop." He raised his hand to me, motioning for me to be still. He looked at Leviathan, not me. It was like they communed with one another. I was homeschooled, so there wasn't anyone to talk to about it. But it's such a hard thing to be afraid of your parents and be afraid for your parents and to need them more than anything. "Come in, honey," he said after his mental deliberation with the snake. And I did, feeling an odd shame and relief. I raised the noose up, and I couldn't find the right words to express how I felt. I settled on, "I think I need help." "Oh no," my dad said and rose from the tub. So quick, so intense. For a heartbeat, I was frightened I almost ran away. Then I saw the tears in his eyes and saw he was more like my dad than he had been in a long time. He hugged me, and everything was okay. It was okay. I was sad all the time, but it was going to be okay. The house was infested, a sauna, and a mess, but life is okay with love, you know. He cried, and I cried, but snakes can't cry. So Leviathan rested on his shoulder. After an extended hug, he took Leviathan off and said he needed to make a call. When he came back, he told me to get in the car with him. I obeyed as I was taught to. We rode in his rickety pickup truck in the dead of night, in complete silence, until he broke it. "I was bad, Mary baby," he said. "What?" "As a kid, I wasn't right," he said. My father randomly twitched, like someone overdosing on drugs, if you've seen that. He flew out of his lane. I grabbed the handle for stability. The oncoming semi approached and honked at us. I braced for impact. He whipped the car back over. His cold coffee cup fell and spilled in my seat. My head banged against the window. It hurt, and I was confused. What was happening? The world looked funny. My eyes teared up again, making the night a foggy mess. I wasn't good as a child, Mary baby. I was different from the others. I saw things. I felt things differently, probably like you. He turned to me and extended his hand. I flinched under it, but he merely rubbed my forehead. "I'm sorry about that," he said, hands on the wheel again, still twitching, still flinching. "You know you're the most precious thing in the world to me, right?" "Yes, I know." We're going fast. You don't want to get pulled over, right?" "Oh, I wouldn't stop for them." "No, Mary baby, because your soul's on the line. I won't let you end up like me." There was no music on. He only allowed a specific type of Christian music anyway. Weird chants that even scared my traditionally Catholic friends. The horns of other drivers he almost crashed into were the only noise. "What do you mean, Daddy?" "I was a bad kid." "What did you do?" "I was off to myself, antisocial, sensitive, cried a lot, and I wasn't afraid of the dark, Mary baby. I'd dig in the dark if I had to." His body convulsed at this, his wrist twisted, and the car whipped, going in and out of our double yellow-lined lane. I screamed. In, out, in, out, in, out. Life-threatening zigzags. Then he adjusted as if nothing happened. "Daddy, I don't think you were evil. I think you were just different." This cheered him up. "Yes, some differences are good," he said. "We're all children under God's rainbow." "Yes," I said. "We're both just different. We're not bad." Then why were we treated badly? We were children of God, but we were supposed to be loved. We love each other. That's not enough, Mary baby. The good people have to love us. But if they're mean, how good can they be? Good is God. They're closer to Him than us, so we have to do what they say. "But Daddy, I don't think you're bad. I don't think I'm bad. I think we should just go home." "No, we're already here. They have to change you, Mary baby. You're not meant to be this way. You'll come out nicely in a minute." We parked. I didn't even notice we had arrived anywhere. I locked my door. We were at a church parking lot. The headlights of perhaps 3 other cars were the only lights. He unlocked my door. I locked it back. Shadowy figures approached our car. "It's okay, honey. I did this when I was a kid. They're going to do the same thing to me that they did to you." Bang, bang, bang. Someone barged against the door. "They made me better, honey. The same thing they're going to do to you." My dad unlocked the door. Someone pulled it open before I could close it back. I screamed. This someone unbuckled my seatbelt and dragged me out. I still have the scars all up my elbow to my hand. Screaming didn't stop him. Crying didn't stop him. And my trail of blood didn't stop him. And that's it. "That's all I remember," she said and shrugged. "Wait. What? There's no way that's all." "Yep. Sorry." "Well, no. Tell me what happened. What did they do to your dad? Does it have to do with the reptiles? What did they do to you?" I just remember walking through a dark hallway into a room with candles lit up everywhere and people in a circle. I think they were all pastors in Calgary. They tried to perform an exorcism. Then it goes blank. "Sorry. No, that's not among the criteria for performing an exorcism." "Excuse me. Are you saying I'm lying?" she said with a well-deserved attitude in her voice, because I might have been yelling at her. I wasn't upset at her, to be clear. Passion polluted my voice, not anger. My church had strict criteria for when people could have an exorcism, and suicide wasn't in it. You don't understand how grateful I was to think that our church was scandal-free. I thought we were the best guys. "No," I said, still not calm. "I'm just saying a child considering suicide isn't in the criteria to perform an exorcism." "Oh, maybe it's different for Calgary." "No, I know it's not." "And how do you know that?" "No, wait, you need to tell me what really happened." "Need?" "Yeah, need. It's not just about you. This is important. I know I misspoke, but for me it was a need. I could fix this. I could take over Calgary in a couple of years. I had to know its secrets." "It's never about me, is it?" she asked. "Well, this certainly just isn't. It's always about you because you're good, you're Christian, and you're going to make this world better or something." "What? No, come on, where is this coming from?" "It's always okay because you're Christian." "That's not fair. I just want to know what happened because it wasn't an exorcism." "What happened?" "It's getting late. I think I want you to leave." "Hey, no wait. I'm doing the right thing here. Let me help you." "Oh, I do not want or need your help. You think you're better than me and could somehow fix it because you're Christian." "No, I think I could fix it because I have the keys to the church." "Oh." She was stunned, and that mischievous grin formed on her face again. Well, she swallowed hard and took a deep breath. "They took something from me, something that's still down there. And I'm not being metaphorical. I can feel it missing. If you lost something, let's go get it back." There was another possibility I hadn't thought of between sex or love that I could have tonight. Adventure. That night we left to have our lives changed forever. Mary and I waited for the security van to go around the church, and then we entered with my keys. Mary used the light from her phone and led the way. Mary rushed through our church. It is a knockoff cathedral like they have in Rome with 4 floors and twists, and turns one could get lost in. With no instructions, no tour, and no direction, Mary prayed through the halls. Spectre-like, so fast, a blur of light, and then a turn. I stumbled in darkness. She pressed on. Her speedy footsteps away from me were a haunting reply. I got up and followed, like a guest in my own home. How did she know where to go? Deeper, deeper. Mary caused us to go. Dark masked her and dark masked us. Everything was more frightening and more real. We journeyed down to the basement, a welcome dead end. As kids, we had played in the basement all the time in youth group. Maliciousness can't exist where kids find peace, or so I thought. "Could you have made a wrong turn?" I asked, catching my breath. Mary did not answer. Mary walked to the edge of the hall, and the walls parted for her in a slow groan. This was impossible. I looked around the empty basement, which I thought I knew so well. Hide and seek, manhunt, and mafia. All of it was down here. How could this all be under my nose? Mary walked through still without a word to me. She hadn't spoken since we got here. Whatever was their call to her, and she certainly wasn't going to ignore their call now. She pulled the ancient door open. Mary swung her flashlight forward and revealed perhaps 100 cages full of children, perhaps. I couldn't tell. The cages pressed against the walls of a massive hall, never touching the center of the room where a purple carpet rested. Sex trafficking. A church I was part of was sex trafficking. My legs went weak, and my stomach turned in knots. Mary pressed forward. I called her name to slow her down, but she wouldn't stop. She went deeper into the darkness, and I could barely stand. "Oh, you've come home," a feminine voice called from the darkness. "And you've brought a friend." I do not know how else to describe it to you, reader, but the air became hard, as if it was thick, a pain to breathe in, as if the air was solid. "Mary," I called to her between coughs. She shone her light on a cage far ahead. I ran after her and collapsed after only a few steps. I couldn't breathe, much less move in this. Above us, something crawled or danced or ran across the ceiling. The pitter-patter was right above me, something like rain. "Mary." I yelled again, but she did not seem interested in me. "Mary." The thing on the ceiling mocked me. "What do you want with my daughter?" "Daughter?" I asked, stupefied, drained, and maybe dying. She ignored my question. "Mary, dear," she said, as sweet as pure sugar, "don't leave your guest behind." And with that, my body was not my own. It was pulled across the floor by something invisible. My back burned against the carpet. My body swung in circles until I ran into Mary. We collided, and I fought to rise again because this was my church. A bastardization of my faith. This was my responsibility. I rose in time to see Mary's phone flung in the air and crash into something. Crack. The light from the phone fled and flung us into darkness. I scrambled in blackness until I found her arm to help her rise. "Mary," I said between gasps for air. "Have to leave. They're sex trafficking." Sex trafficking. That voice in the dark yelled. "Young man, I have never. I am Tiamat, the mother of all gods, and I am soul trafficking." By her will, the cage lit up in front of us, not by anything natural, but by an unholy orange light. Bathed in this orange light was the skeleton of a child in the fetal position. The child looked at me and frowned. At the top of it was a sign that read, "Mary, Daugchter of Isaac, who is Acor of Nehebeq. For Israel." Wah wah wah. It was all too much, too confusing. I didn't get a break to process either. An uncontrollable shudder of fear went through my entire body, as if the devil himself tapped my shoulder. I lost control of my body. My body rose in the pitch black. I was a human balloon, and that was terrifying. I held on to Mary's arm for leverage, anything to keep my feet from leaving the ground. She tried to pull me back down with her. It didn't work. That force, that wicked woman, no creature, no being, that being that controlled the room yanked my arm from Mary. It snapped right at the shoulder. I screamed. I cried. That limp, useless arm pulled me up. This feminine being unleashed a wet heat on me the closer I got, like I was being gently dripped on by something above. But it didn't make sense. I couldn't comprehend the shape of it. I kept hearing the pitter-patter, pitter-patter, pitter-patter of so many feet crawling or walking above me. And how it touched me, how it pulled me up without using its actual hands, but an invisible fist squeezing my body. I got closer, and the heat coming from the thing burned, as if I was outside of an oven, or like a giant's hot breath. I was an ant ready to be devoured by an ape. I reached an apex. My body froze in the air just outside of the peak of that heat. It burned my skin. The being scorched me, an angry black sun that did not provide light nor warmth, only burning rage. "Did you know you belong to me now?" the powerful voice said. I shook my head no twice. Mary called my name from below. Without touching me, the being pushed my cheeks in and made me nod my head like I was a petulant child learning to obey. "Oh yes, you do. Oh yes, you do," she said. "Now let's make it permanent. I just need to write my name on your heart." The buttons on my flannel ripped open. The voice tossed my white t-shirt away. Next, my chest unraveled with surgical precision. I was delicately unseen. In less than 10 seconds, I was deconstructed with the precision of the world's greatest surgeons. All that stood between her and my heart were my ribs. She treated them as simple door handles, something that could be pulled to get what she wanted. One at a time, they pulled open my ribs to reveal my heart. The pain was excruciating, and my chest sounded like the 4th of July. The pain was excruciating. My screams echoed off the wall like I was a choir singing this thing's praises. Only once she had pulled apart every rib did she stop. "Oh dear, it seems you already belong to someone else. Fine, I suppose we'll get you patched up." Maybe I moaned a reply. Hard to say. I was unaware of anything except that my body was being repaired and I was being lowered. I landed gently but crashed through exhaustion. "Daughter, get him out of here. It's not your time yet." I moaned something. I had to learn more. I had to understand. This was bigger than I was told. I wasn't in hell, but this certainly wasn't heaven. "Oh, don't start crying, boy. If you want anyone to blame, talk to your boss." Oh, and I would, dear reader. I stayed home the next few days to recover mentally and to get a gun to kill that blasphemous, sacrilegious bastard. When I was a kid, I experienced something so traumatic that my brain erased it from my memory, completely. For years, it was just gone. At least it was until one afternoon. I was sitting on the couch with my son, watching random educational videos on YouTube. He's 6, full of energy, and obsessed with learning videos. He wants to know everything about everything. It was nice, just the two of us hanging out, him curled up next to me, asking a million questions. Then it came on. The upbeat jingle and that cheerful, sing-songy voice. Schoolhouse Rock. 3 is a magic number. Yes, it is. It's a magic number. Somewhere in the ancient mystic trinity, you get 3 as a magic number. My chest tightened immediately, like a fist had closed around my heart. I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. That song, that melody, it reached deep into my brain and pulled out something I didn't even know was there. The memories hit me like a freight train. "Daddy." My son's voice was distant, muffled, like I was underwater. "You okay?" I blinked and realized I was staring at the TV, my hand clenched so tightly around the arm of the couch that my knuckles were white. My son was looking up at me, his face scrunched in confusion. I started to say something, anything to brush it off, but my throat felt like sandpaper. "Daddy," he said again. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing my hand to let go of the couch. "I just need to run to the bathroom." I stood up, nearly tripping over the coffee table as I made my way to the bathroom. My legs felt weak, my whole body trembling. I gripped the edge of the sink, trying to steady myself. The song was still playing in the living room, that stupid, joyful voice echoing in my head. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30. It wasn't just a song. It was the song, the one they played to calm us down. When I was a child, I went to Crestwood Middle School. The school was large but very old. It had poor insulation, making it freezing in the winter and hot in the summer. No matter how much they tried to paint the place, it always looked outdated. The hallways echoed. The floors creaked. Hell, most of the faculty had been students there themselves as children. The rules were strict, And the teachers didn't mess around. Dress codes, assigned seats at lunch, and even how we walked in the hallways were monitored. It felt like every corner of the school was under their watchful eyes, even when you couldn't see them. Most of the staff at Crestwood were all about rules and discipline. They acted like they were running a military academy instead of an elementary school. But my favorite teacher, Miss Harper, was different. She was warm, playful, like she actually liked kids. While the other teachers scowled and barked orders, she'd crack jokes and smile. She wore colorful dresses that swished when she walked, and her room always smelled clean, unlike the rest of the school, which smelled more like old books, old wood, and mildew. Everyone loved her. She was the one teacher who made me feel safe at that school. She'd ask about our hobbies, encourage me to draw or write stories, and even keep a stash of candy in her desk for when we did well on tests. But despite the safety of Ms. Harper's classroom, we kids couldn't help but feel uneasy at Crestwood. Maybe it was just the age of the school, maybe it was the rules, or maybe it was the rumors. Every kid in the school had heard them. Stories about kids disappearing, about strange noises in the vents, about the principal supposedly eating kids who misbehaved. It all sounded ridiculous, but at Crestwood, the line between weird and normal was thinner than at most schools. My best friend at the time was a kid named Alex. He was small for his age, with messy hair and a laugh that was contagious. We bonded over many things, Pokemon cards, PlayStation 2, but it was our shared obsession with urban legends that really fueled our friendship, and Crestwood was full of them. Whenever we heard a new one, we'd go off on missions to investigate them. Most of the time, it was harmless fun, investigating the haunted bathroom, or trying to sneak into the teacher's lounge. But one day, we heard a new rumor. There was a hidden basement under the school. Over the next couple of weeks, Alex and I started asking around about the basement rumor to the 8th graders. According to the stories, it was where the teachers took the bad kids. No one knew what happened down there. Some said that is where Principal Johnson eats kids. Some said it's haunted, or there is some kind of monster that lives down there. But one thing was certain. The kids who'd gone missing over the years, supposedly, that's where they ended up. Alex was obsessed with the idea. We have to find it. He told me one afternoon. I don't know, man. I said, kicking a rock across the cracked blacktop. What if we get caught? Or what if the rumors are true, and we go missing? He shot back, his eyes wide with excitement. But what if we're the ones who finally figure it out? We'd be legends. I wasn't as enthusiastic as he was, but I went along with it anyway. It was challenging to say no to Alex once he got an idea in his head. It didn't hurt that he was my only friend. That afternoon, after the final bell rang, we didn't head straight home. Instead, we stayed behind, hiding in the bushes until the coast was clear. Okay, Alex whispered, peeking out. Now's our chance. We slipped back into the building through a side door that never quite latched properly. The halls were silent. Just being in the school while it was empty was unsettling enough by itself. Where do we even start? I whispered. Alex pointed down the hallway toward the janitor's closet. Mark said it's somewhere near there. Mark was an 8th grader, the loud and obnoxious kind. I didn't trust him, but Alex did. We crept down the hall, our sneakers squeaking softly on the floor. The janitor's closet was locked, as expected, but Alex had come prepared. He pulled an old, expired credit card from his pocket he had gotten from his parents and started fiddling with the door. "Do you even know what you're doing?" I muttered, glancing nervously over my shoulder. "Shut up and keep watch," he hissed. It only took him a few minutes to get the door open. I was about to congratulate him when I saw the look on his face. Dude. I turned to see what he was looking at. Inside the closet, behind the rows of cleaning supplies and buckets, there was a small door. Neither of us said anything for a moment. "So, do we open it?" Alex asked, his voice trembling just a little. I wanted to say no. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get out of there. But Alex was already reaching for the latch. Alex pulled the door open, revealing a narrow, dark hallway. "Whoa," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. The walls were old brick, and the floor was plain, cracked concrete. The only light came from the janitor's closet, spilling weakly into the space. At the far end of the hallway was an old wooden door with a padlock dangling from its latch. "Okay, it's locked." "Let's go," I said, my voice shaky. But Alex wasn't listening. He was already going down the hallway. "Alex," I hissed, glancing over my shoulder toward the main hall. "Come on, man. This is stupid. We're gonna get caught." "Nobody's even here," Alex said, his voice echoing slightly off the cold walls. "It's fine. Just come on." I hesitated, my heart hammering in my chest. The silence in the school was oppressive. My heart was beating out of my chest, but I couldn't leave Alex there alone. With a sigh, I went after him, the cold, stale air of the hallway hitting me like a slap. Alex stood at the far end of the hallway, staring at the padlocked door. He reached out and jiggled the lock. "It's old," he said. "I bet we could break it." "Or," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "we could leave. Right now. This is crazy, Alex. We'll get in so much trouble." Alex ignored me. He turned back toward the janitor's closet and climbed up. For a split second, I felt relief, thinking he was giving up. Then I heard the scrape of metal. "What are you doing?" I called out. Alex came back into view, struggling to carry a red fire extinguisher. "If we can't pick it, we'll just smash it." "Are you serious?" I said, panic rising in my voice. "That's going to be so loud." "So what? Nobody's here," he said, grinning. "Relax, dude." Before I could argue, he hoisted the extinguisher and swung it at the padlock. Clang! The sound was deafening in the tiny hallway. I flinched, glancing up at the door, fully expecting someone to come storming in. "Alex, stop," I hissed. "We're gonna get caught." But Alex just shook his head. "One more, and it'll break." He raised the extinguisher again and brought it down with all his strength. The lock gave way, clattering to the ground. "There," Alex said triumphantly, dropping the fire extinguisher with a thud. "See, told you it'd be fine." I wanted to scream at him, to beg him to leave, but he was already reaching for the handle. "Alex," I started, but it was too late. He pulled the door open. Alex pulled the door open, and both of us leaned forward, holding our breath as we peered into whatever was on the other side. Behind the door, there it was, a set of old stone steps, worn smooth in the center, descended into pitch blackness. The air that wafted out was damp and stale, carrying a faint, sour smell that made my throat feel tight. There was no light down there, just stairs descending into a dark abyss. Alex, who had been so full of bravado a moment ago, froze. I could feel his confidence drain out of him like air from a punctured balloon. "Ugh," he said, his voice shaky for the first time. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just stood there, staring at those stairs, my body cold and rigid. "Okay," Alex finally said, his voice an awkward mix of forced confidence and creeping fear. It's just stairs. Probably, like, storage or something, right?" I didn't answer. Alex looked at me, his expression changed from fear to half a grin. "Come on, dude. Don't wimp out on me now." "I'm not wimping out," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I mean, what if there's someone down there? What if the rumors are true?" "There's no one here," he said, a little too laudably, like he was trying to convince himself more than me. "The whole school's empty. It's fine." Neither of us moved, but I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. "Look," Alex finally said, swallowing hard. "I'll go first. You just stay close, okay?" I wanted to tell him no. I wanted to grab him and drag him back, out of the hallway, out of the school, and back into the safety of the sunlight. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded. Alex took a shaky breath and stepped forward, his sneaker scuffing against the edge of the first step. As Alex was about to climb the first stair, we heard it. A faint sound, almost melodic, coming down the hallway. Whistling. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. Crap, the janitor. I urged Alex. Alex turned to look at me, his eyes wide. His hand instinctively reached for mine, like we were about to get caught doing something we couldn't explain. I quietly scrambled back up the hallway, silently closing the door inside the closet, praying it wouldn't make a noise. We pressed ourselves against the brick walls of the hallway, barely breathing. The whistling was getting closer, and I could hear the shuffle of heavy boots on the floor and the jingling of the janitor's keys. We could hear him digging through the janitor's closet, getting his cleaning supplies. I could hear him humming a tune, something old and off-key, as he worked. My pulse was racing. I felt like my skin was vibrating with anxiety. We waited in the dark hallway, holding our breath, not daring to make a sound. The whistling grew louder, then softer again as the janitor started moving further down the hall. I could hear him muttering to himself now, probably complaining about some mess he had to clean up. Then, finally, the sound of his footsteps faded into the distance, and we were left with nothing but silence and the darkness of the hallway. When the coast was clear, I breathed a sigh of relief. Alex and I let go of each other, not realizing we had been grasping onto each other in the darkness. When we finally left the closet back out in the light, Alex was pale, his eyes wide, and I could tell he was just as freaked out as I was. "Okay," I whispered. "We need to leave. Now." Alex didn't argue. He just nodded quickly, his mind already scrambling to process what had almost happened. We snuck back out of the school, our breath heavy. I couldn't shake the image of the stairs, the darkness below, but we didn't talk about it. Not yet. We made it out of the school without anyone noticing, and as soon as we were outside, the evening air felt like an instant relief. Alex and I started the walk to our houses. Alex was the first to speak. "So we proved it," he said, his voice a little shaky but excited. I nodded slowly, my adrenaline still rushing through me. "Yeah, we did." We both stood there for a moment, the weight of what we'd found settling in. "I knew it," Alex said with a grin. "It's real. The basement. Dude, I can't wait to tell everyone. We're going back. Next time, we bring equipment. Flashlights, cameras, everything." I was hesitant at first, the fear from earlier still lingering in the pit of my stomach. But as Alex spoke, something else started to creep in. Excitement. We both paused for a moment, looking at each other, before erupting in cheers and high fives. The next day, we came prepared. Flashlights, a camera, and snacks. Everything we thought a good mission should have. We spent the morning rehearsing what we'd say if anyone caught us. We were ready. After school ended, we hung back, waiting in the bushes again. When the coast was finally clear, we snuck back into the school, just like we did the day before. We reached the janitor's closet, and Alex, with his usual bravado, yanked the door open. But before either of us could move, a hand shot out from behind us, gripping my shoulder like a vice. I froze. My heart stopped cold in my chest. "Going somewhere." The voice was low, gravelly. I whipped around to see the principal standing there, his face twisted in anger, his eyes sharp with menace. In his hand, he held the broken lock from the basement door. For a split second, my mind went blank. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. All of our planned responses went out the window. Alex was the first to break the silence. He stammered, his voice high-pitched with fear. "Please, don't eat us." I glanced at him, my stomach sinking. There was no time to process it. He stood there, looming over us, his anger palpable. I opened my mouth to apologize, but nothing came out. All I could manage was a breathless, "Sorry, we weren't going to do anything." The principal stared at us for what felt like an eternity. His eyes were filled with a dangerous look of authority. But then, just like that, his expression softened. He let out a harsh chuckle. "Eat you? Haha. No, no, I'm not going to eat you." He shook his head, almost amused. I felt my body start to relax, but the unease didn't go away. Not completely. "You two better get out of here," the principal continued. "And don't let me catch you doing something like this again." We didn't argue. We didn't even say anything. We just nodded, backing away slowly. I glanced over my shoulder as we turned to leave. When I looked back, the principal was still standing there, staring at us, like a predator watching its prey. It wasn't a look of concern or disapproval. It was something else, something darker or more dangerous. I had a feeling that he knew exactly what we'd been up to, that he had been watching us all along. I went home that night, expecting a call home to my parents. I kept checking the phone, waiting for it to ring, but nothing came. No call, no angry voice telling me I was in trouble. The next day, I went to school with a pit in my stomach. Every minute felt like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see the principal or one of the teachers waiting to pull me aside. But nothing happened. The day passed normally, almost too normally. But as I walked through the halls, I started to notice it. The teachers, all of them, seemed to be watching me. Not in the usual way, like when they were making sure I was paying attention. No, this was different. Their eyes followed me more intently, like they were keeping track of my every move. It made my skin crawl. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't. It felt like I was the center of attention, and not in a positive way. Every time I looked up, one of them was watching me, their gaze colder than it should have been. I had to talk to someone. There was only one teacher I trusted, Miss Harper. She was always kind to me. She always listened when I needed her. I'd always felt safe around her, like she was the only one who didn't treat me like just another student. So, during lunch, I made my way to her classroom. "Miss Harper," I said, standing in the doorway. She looked up from her desk, her usual warm smile softening when she saw the look on my face. "Yes, honey." I hesitated. I wasn't sure where to even start. How could I explain everything? I need to tell you something," I said, voice trembling. "Something happened. Something's not right here." She motioned for me to come in, and I stepped inside, my heart pounding. I told her everything. The basement, Alex, the principal, how we'd found the hidden door and almost gotten caught, how the principal had known what we were up to. I even told her about how the teachers had been watching me, like they knew something I didn't. When I finished, there was a long silence. Ms. Harper didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at me, her face unreadable. She smiled, that warm, reassuring smile she always had. "It sounds like you've been through a lot. I'll take care of it, okay? You don't have to worry. Everything will be fine, and I won't let anything happen to you or Alex." She reached into her desk drawer, pulling out a piece of candy. She handed it to me, her eyes soft with what looked like genuine care. "Here, candy makes everything feel better," she laughed, her voice gentle. I trusted her. She was the one person at this school who'd always been kind to me, always made me feel safe. I unwrapped it and popped it into my mouth. Immediately, I felt a strange sensation wash over me. My mouth turned dry, my head a little foggy. A heaviness settled in my chest, and the world around me began to blur at the edges. My legs felt weak, my balance off. I reached out for the desk to steady myself, but it felt like the room was tilting. I blinked, trying to focus. "Ms. Harper," I whispered, my voice barely a sound. She was sitting there, still smiling. And then, the darkness started to close in. My vision tunneled, everything going black around the edges, the room fading into shadows. I tried to take a step. I tried to keep my feet under me, but my body wouldn't listen. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was her smile. I woke with a jolt, my breath sharp and shallow. My body ached all over, and my head throbbed. I was sitting upright in an old wooden chair. My arms were tied to the back of it. I panicked, pulling against them, but they wouldn't budge. I tried to shout, but my throat was dry. My mouth tasted like something foul, and for a moment, all I could do was sit there, taking in the world around me, trying to understand what had happened. The room was cold, and the walls were made of rough old stone, chipped and cracked, as if they had been standing for centuries. The air smelled of dust and mildew. There were shelves lining the walls, stacked high with old books, the titles unreadable. Other things sat on the shelves too, strange jars with unidentifiable contents, faded photographs, and other old knickknacks. In front of me, there was a small old table with an even older TV on it. The screen was dark for now, but I couldn't help but stare at it, dread rising in my chest. What was this place? Why was I here? Why was I tied to this chair? Then next to me, I noticed someone else there. Alex was tied to a chair next to me. I began to understand why I was there, and I knew then exactly where we were. The basement. He was sitting next to me, slumped over, still unconscious. His wrists were bound to the chair just like mine, and his head lolled forward. I tried to get his attention. "Alex," I rasped, my voice weak and hoarse. "Alex, wake up." But there was no response. He didn't stir. He was breathing softly, like he was sleeping peacefully. Panic surged through me again. I jerked against the ropes, trying to loosen them, to get free. I had to get out of here. Whatever they had brought us down here for, it wasn't good. I began to sob, thinking of my parents. The door creaked open. I froze, and my breath caught in my throat. It was Miss Harper. She walked into the room, calm as ever, her movements graceful, like she didn't have a care in the world. Her soft smile never faltered as she came toward me. The same smile she always wore in class. The one that made you feel safe, like you were in good hands. But now in this place, that smile didn't feel like reassurance. It just felt wrong. "Hey there," she said, her voice sweet, almost sing-song. "You're awake. That's good. You're going to be just fine." I swallowed, my heart racing. "Ms. Harper, what's going on? Why did you do this? What's happening?" She didn't seem in any rush to answer. She just continued to smile, her eyes soft and kind. "It's okay," she said, her voice gentle. "It'll all be over soon. You don't have to worry." My mind reeled, my thoughts scrambled. But I couldn't think of anything else to ask. Nothing that would make sense. My eyes kept flickering between Alex and the door, trying to find an escape and piece together how I'd gotten here. Ms. Harper leaned down, brushing a stray lock of hair from my face. "You're nervous, aren't you?" she asked, her voice warm and soothing. "It's okay. I understand. It's hard, but it won't be for much longer. Here," she said as they flicked on the TV and turned on the VCR. "Watch some cartoons while you wait. It'll help calm you down." And then the screen on the TV flickered to life. The familiar song of Schoolhouse Rock began to play, its upbeat melody grating against the cold silence that had settled around me. I hadn't heard it since elementary school. 3 is a magic number. I tried to turn to Alex. I tried to wake him, but he didn't respond. His head hung limp against the chair, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The song played on, and the numbers rang out one by one, each one a nail in the coffin of my sanity. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27. My thoughts raced with the melody of the song. 30. And then the door opened again. Several figures entered, their forms draped in dark, flowing robes. They moved silently, gliding across the room like shadows. They came toward me, and I tried to scream and struggle, but my body wouldn't obey. They untied me from the chair with ease, their hands cold and impersonal. I was too weak to fight back, too dizzy to scream. They dragged me and Alex out of the room. We made our way down the hall, past flickering oil lamps hanging along the walls. I begged them to let me go. My voice was weak, barely a whisper, but I couldn't stop myself. Please, I pleaded, my throat raw. Please, let me go. I don't know what's happening. I won't tell anyone, I swear. But they didn't respond. Their faces were hidden by the hoods of their robes, and they didn't even slow down. They just kept dragging me, my feet scraping against the cold stone floor, my body too weak to do anything but stumble along. Alex was still unconscious, his body limp as they pulled him alongside me. I tried to look around to find something, anything, that could explain this. We moved through a narrow hallway, lit by flickering oil lamps, and into a large room. It felt like stepping into a nightmare. The air was thick with the scent of incense, heavy and suffocating, and the walls were adorned with grotesque carvings and strange symbols I didn't recognize. But it was the center of the room that made my stomach drop. There was a pool in the middle of the floor, but not a pool of water. It was dark, black as midnight, and the liquid inside shimmered, almost like oil. The faint smell that emanated from it made me gag. At the far end of the room, there was an altar, a massive stone slab, its surface covered in something I couldn't identify. Around the altar, skulls and horns of different animals were mounted on the walls, arranged in sickening patterns. Some of them were small, others large, their hollow eyes staring out at me with a dead, unblinking gaze. The place felt ancient, but it was the symbol above the altar that sent a chill racing down my spine. It was carved into the wood, twisted and warped. I couldn't make out all the details, but the shape of it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I knew, deep down, that whatever it wasn't something meant to be seen. They dragged me to the center of the room. My knees hit the cold stone with a sickening thud, the impact sending a jolt through my already battered body. I couldn't keep myself upright. My head was swimming, and everything felt distant, like I was barely tethered to reality. Alex was still out, his body slumped in a heap beside me. I wanted to reach out to him, shake him awake, but my hands wouldn't move. The figures who had dragged us in were standing in a perfect circle around us. The only sound was the soft, steady rhythm of their chanting. I couldn't understand the words. They weren't in any language I knew, but it didn't matter. The sound was enough to send a deep, primal fear racing through my chest. And then, the chanting stopped. A figure stepped forward. They were taller than the others, their robe a deep crimson that caught the dim light from the oil lamps. They reached up and pulled back their hood, revealing a face I would never forget. It was the principal. One by one, the figures removed their hoods, revealing the faces of everyone I had known as my teachers. The faculty, the entire faculty, even the lunch lady, was there. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. My body trembled, the terror crawling through every part of me. Please, let us go. I managed to choke out, but my words were nothing more than a whisper in the thick silence. Please, don't do this. But the principal just stood there, his eyes cold and unreadable. This is necessary, he said. It's been written. It's time. I wanted to close my eyes, to block it all out, but I couldn't. I was trapped. There was nowhere to run, no way to escape. The chanting started again, this time louder, rising in intensity until it felt like it was vibrating the walls themselves. Alex finally stirred, his eyes fluttering open, a mix of confusion and fear on his face. He tried to sit up, mumbling something, his voice slurred and groggy. The figures, now a tight circle around us, closed in even closer, their movements silent but purposeful. Alex tried to struggle against the hands that held him, his voice rising in panic. Where are we? What's happening? Let me go. But no one responded. The chanting grew louder, more insistent, the sound echoing off the cold stone walls. I felt the grip on my own arms tighten. Alex broke down, tears streaming down his face. "Please, please, let me go," he sobbed, his body trembling violently. One of the figures holding me let go. They turned their full attention to Alex, and the rest of the group moved in closer. I could barely see Alex's face through my own tears. "No," I shouted, fighting against the last figure holding me, trying to reach him. But it was too late. The faculty members, those twisted, hooded figures, grabbed him, holding him down. "Wait," I cried, desperation twisting my voice. "Please, let him go. We didn't do anything." But they didn't respond. One of them reached out and grabbed Alex by the arms, dragging him forward. Alex was screaming now, his voice a desperate, tortured sound that echoed through the room. "No, no, no." And then they threw him into the pool. Alex emerged once, gasping for air, his face covered in the thick, black substance. His scream was a gargled, terrifying sound, almost inhuman, before he sank back under the surface. The figures continued their chanting, their voices blending into a low, ominous hum. I fought harder against the hands holding me, thrashing and kicking, anything to get to Alex. "Stop," I screamed, my voice hoarse. "Please, stop." But they ignored me, their focus completely on Alex and the black pool. I took my chance. The figure holding me was distracted, their eyes locked on the others. I bit down hard on their hand, feeling the warm, metallic taste of blood fill my mouth as I tore away. The figure cursed, reeling back, and I pushed off with all my strength, throwing myself forward. I ran, my heart pounding, my legs moving on instinct. I didn't know where I was going and didn't care. I just had to get out of there, away from the chanting, away from them and that room. I heard a shout, the sound of robes rustling as they pursued me, but I didn't look back. The air in my lungs burned with each breath, my body aching as I crashed through the door and out into the hallway. I ran down the hallway, past the oil lamps, and back up the stairs. I burst out of the janitor's closet, and I didn't stop until I was outside in the cold night air. I didn't look back. I couldn't. All I could do was run. I finally made it home, my body shaking from the cold night air, my mind racing 100 miles an hour. As I got to my driveway, I saw the police car parked outside. When I walked through the door, my parents were waiting for me, both of them standing in the living room with tense expressions. My mother's face was pale, her hands wringing in front of her, and my father stood next to her, looking at me like I was some kind of criminal. "Where have you been?" my mom demanded, her voice sharp. "Do you know how worried we've been? The police have been looking for you." I didn't even care about the questions. All I cared about was what had happened to Alex, what I had seen, and what I had barely escaped. "What happened?" my dad asked, though there was a coldness to his voice that didn't make sense. He was acting as if he was more annoyed than concerned. I told them everything. The basement, Alex, the figures, the chanting, the pool. I expected some kind of reaction from my parents, some kind of urgency, but their faces were surprisingly blank. But before I could say anything more, one of the officers who had been standing in the corner of the room, keeping a distance, stepped forward. He was tall, his uniform neatly pressed. "We'll take care of it," he said, giving me a brief nod. He turned to my parents. "We'll look into it. Don't worry. We'll get to the bottom of this." The officer didn't say anything more, but when he glanced at me one last time, I caught it. That subtle shift in his expression, that look that told me everything I needed to know. He knew. He knew exactly what had happened, and he was a part of it. I could feel it in my bones, the sick realization crawling through me like something cold and dark. He wasn't here to help. He was here to protect the truth. I felt like I was suffocating. My throat went dry, and the weight of everything, the faculty, the police, my parents, crushed down on me all at once. I began to question everything, every little detail. Did my parents know? Were they involved too? The way they stood there, their eyes darting around nervously, I wasn't sure anymore. Maybe they were complicit. Maybe they had been protecting me all these years, keeping me blind to the truth. I couldn't trust them. Not anymore. That night, as I lay in my bed, my thoughts spinning in circles, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't stay here. This town of lies and people who were part of something worse than I imagined was too much for me. I knew it'd be just a matter of time before they finished the job. I packed a bag, grabbed what little I had, and without a word to anyone, I slipped out of the house. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I couldn't. There was no one to trust anymore. I knew that cult, or whatever they were, would get me if I stayed. It was only a matter of time. I ran, my heart pounding in my chest, my feet pounding against the pavement as I made my way down the empty street, away from my house, away from everything I had ever known. As I disappeared into the night, I knew one thing for sure. I would never return home. Not now. Not ever. I stood there, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, my face pale, my eyes hollow. The memory, the horrors, they all crashed back to me at once. I could hear the faint echo of 3 is a magic number still ringing in my ears, though it had long since faded from the screen. Splashing cold water onto my face, I tried to snap myself out of it. I leaned over the sink, my hands gripping the edge. I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to me, and what had happened to Alex. Bringing myself back to the present, I left the bathroom, my son waiting for me outside. "You feel better, Daddy?" he asked. "Yeah, I'll be okay." "Hey, let's go grab some ice cream, buddy," I said. Leaving the house, my neighbor Nick was outside, trimming his bushes. "Hey, neighbor." I gave him a wave. But as I got in my car, I couldn't help but notice something. He was watching me still, holding his shears, his smile faded, and he was looking at me with that familiar, knowing look.